are these people?
Last week, we talked about the ICJ stuff, the recent hearings, and we've covered most of those. And we've been wondering what it actually will accomplish, as I'm sure many people are as well. So I found this from Sam Husseini saying that the ICJ hearings going on this week are effectively largely around applying the Geneva Conventions to Gaza, but neither the Israeli or U.S. governments recognize this, though the Biden administration wouldn't come out and say it, right? So, you know, if you want to go see what happened that week, you're welcome to go check out our last segment on it. But he wrote this, saying, is the purpose of Israel to destroy international law on April 29th after those proceedings, I think during the proceedings. But the shedding of international law is a feature, not a bug of Israel to the wider imperial system. So, at the end of her comments to the ICJ yesterday, Blaine Neal Goralahle stated, in addition to seeking to destroy the protective application of international law to the Palestinian people, Israel appears set on destroying the very international framework created to ensure compliance with international law, with profound consequences that reverberate far beyond Palestine and Palestinians. So, Husseini has been arguing for some time that this is actually Imperial Israel's purpose. I regularly hear people say that U.S. government's backing of Israel is costing the U.S. government in various ways, including eroding international law. Sam Husseini doesn't buy it. So here's him calling that out a while ago. Greece, in violation of its treaty obligations under ICC, I hypothesize that part of the purpose of the imperial project to call Israel is to obliterate the law, right? And this is about Netanyahu landing in Crete. You remember when he made a little European tour on December 17th, 2024. So, but right. Sam Husseini continues saying this is a feature, not a bug. The imperial system wants at times to instrumentalize international law, which is one way of effectively, tactically destroying it as a meaningful thing. And at times, working hand in glove, it may seek to obliterate it completely. It's Biden and Trump colluding. Here are Negrole's remarks, which contain lots of good information throughout the headline of the video. This is about Gaza's future is not really accurate. It's about the world future, as she says. She added, if these venerable institutions are to survive, the international community must act while it can to uphold them. Indeed, then she claims the international community is so acting, citing the advisory proceedings ongoing at the ICJ. Here, I think she's wrong. The international community is failing. It is seeking advisory opinions when it should be seeking further orders under the Geneva Convention. It should finally be moved with a General Assembly Uniting for Peace resolution, as I've repeatedly urged. Have you seen anything from Husseini about this, Care Bear? About the Uniting for Peace? Well, we'll get into it. So, following the latest orders from the ICJ that Israel halt its military offensive in Rafah, some claims that while the orders of the court are, of course, binding, there's no enforcement mechanism. The court's orders were, of course, the result of South Africa invoking the Genocide Convention against Israel and its repeated requests for additional orders from the ICJ. In fact, there is such an enforcement mechanism. It's the UN Security Council. The ICJ is a court that issues orders. The UNSC could act like a sheriff, which implements those orders. The UNGA actually held a vote for a ceasefire in Gaza. 153 countries voting yes last year, using United for Peace, but it didn't invoke meaningful collective measures. Uniting for Peace has been used numerous times, perhaps most successfully in the 1956 war, which actually involved Gaza. In choreographed manner, Israel and then Britain and France invaded Egypt after Gamal Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. The French and British vetoes at the Security Council, of course, prevented it from taking appropriate action. Most of the rest of the world, including the US and USSR together, moved to use Uniting for Peace. This was the first time UN peacekeepers were used. The United Nations Emergency Force was created to ensure the withdrawal of the invading armies. So here is the Uniting for Peace resolution, right? Which states that in any cases where the Security Council, because of a lack of unanimity among its 5 permanent members, fails to act as required to maintain international security and peace, the General Assembly shall consider the matter immediately and may issue appropriate recommendations to UN members for collective measures, including the use of armed force when necessary, in order to maintain or restore international security and peace. It was adopted the 3rd of November, 1950, after 14 days of Assembly discussions by a vote of 52-5 with 2 abstentions. The resolution was designed to provide the UN with an alternative avenue for action when at least one P5 member uses its veto to obstruct the Security Council from carrying out its functions. So, essentially, we've talked about U.S. vetoing any of those acts before, right? I think you talked about it specifically, that lady with her hand up, covered in blood at this point. If you remember. I forget her name.
Yeah, it's Greenfeld.
Yeah, that's it.
Linda Thomas Greenfeld.
Yep. So, President Eisenhower would later report to Congress in Egypt, the United Nations caused the world to turn away from war. Through a series of resolutions, the General Assembly effectively mobilized world opinion to achieve a ceasefire, and France and the UK shortly agreed to withdraw their forces. The Assembly's moral pressure played a powerful part in securing the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Egyptian territory in March of this year. The U.S. State Department later noted that Israel kept its troops in Gaza until March 19th, when the United States finally compelled the Israeli government to withdraw its troops. The problem, of course, is that the U.S. government has misused its veto power to prevent the UNSC from actually ensuring security, vetoing numerous resolutions on Palestine since October, and another UNSC draft resolution by Algeria is now in the works, and it's evident that the U.S. government will veto and/or water it down. But there is a mechanism to address such a situation. It's called Uniting for Peace, whereby the UN General Assembly asserts itself in a situation threatening the peace when the Security Council won't or can't. Uniting for Peace Resolution 377 states, resolves that if the Security Council, because of lack of unanimity, we read that earlier, with a view to making appropriate recommendations to members, right, all that fun stuff, use of armed force, peace and security. If not in session at the time, the General Assembly may meet an emergency special session with 24 hours at the request. Therefore, such emergency special session shall be called if requested by the Security Council. So, essentially, this is a way to force the UN to actually state things without veto power, right? Like if it's just one person. But they can urge countries to fully utilize. So this requires public pressure is my problem, right? So, but it can allow them to take these actions, right? So it could suspend Israel from participation in its activities, as the General Assembly did, to the formidable criminal apartheid regime in South Africa and to the genocidal Yugoslavia. So you're not a part of the General Assembly, right? Until you comply. That's one, right? They can set up an international criminal tribunal for Israel in order to prosecute its highest level civilian and military officials for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and so on. Recommend economic sanctions against Israel. Recommend UN members sever diplomatic relations with Israel and admit Palestine as a full-fledged UN member state. So that could be part of this if you actually pushed for this. So, but the Guardian reports in Israel seem set on destroying system of international law compliance. So the Council for Palestinian State described Israel's actions as antithetical to a peace-loving state. She said the restrictions on the fundamental rights of the Palestinian people's attack on the United Nations and on UN officials' property and premises is deliberate obstruction of the organization's work in its attempt to destroy an entire UN subsidiary organ. Were unprecedented in the history of the organization. See the clip? We played that clip last week, so you're welcome to go check that out on the channel. He had also represented the South African government in its genocide convention case against Israel, a separate but related case. So enter Craig Muckhaber, right? He's an international human rights lawyer and former director of the New York office of the UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights. He stepped down with his post in 2023 in a pinned letter on unfolding genocide, right? He left essentially because of the situation in Gaza. But he noted on Monday, 5 days of hearings have begun at the ICJ on the Israeli regime's attacks on interference with UNRWA and other UN agency in Palestine. The court's opinion will undoubtedly find against the regime, given its flagrant violations of international law and attacking international organizations and obstructing humanitarian aid. The U.S., which has been complicit in these violations, will shamefully intervene in support of the Israeli regime alongside a few other complicit countries. He recently warned if Israel gets away with genocide, all of that nascent project of a world governed by human rights and the rule of law crumbles. And then it's every person for themselves. He has recently written that the UN General Assembly should organize a protective force for Palestine and a global embargo on the regime. Arab governments, get off your knees and protect the Palestinian people before it's too late. Other governments, join the Hague Group, isolate and cut off all relations with the regime, arrest perpetrators, prosecute complicity within your own borders. ICJ and ICC, end the delay and act now. So he has spoken in favor of the UNGA using Uniting for Peace. Muckhaber states that the Trump admin is trying to strip UNRWA, a subsidiary body of the UN Nations General Assembly, of its diplomatic immunity. The appropriate reciprocal response from all 193 countries that are members of the UNGA would be to strip all U.S. diplomats of their diplomatic immunity whenever they are. So, thoughts, Care Bear? You got anything? What do you think?
It's just depressing. I mean, but we knew this though. It's just a lot of rhetoric, and it just actually this just reminds me of I was talking to a guy young. I think he's like in his 20s, and like obviously we were talking about like AOC Bernie, and he was basically saying, "Oh, AOC is our best chance because, according to him, she talks well." Basically, is what he was saying, and I was like, "Talk means nothing without action." And so, it's one thing to say that because anyone can say whatever, and even then, politicians don't say a whole lot. They leave enough room. They leave enough vagueness so that it gives the impression that they're actually meaning to do something, and you can try and fill in the gaps into what you're thinking that they want you to do, even though they don't explicitly say that that's the very thing that they are intending to do. So that's where politicians get you. And I kind of think of it like this in terms of the ICJ. Yeah, you played. Honestly, like, yeah, you did the segment. I appreciate you did it, but I was bored to tears because it was just kind of like, we went for this already. We went over this a year ago. So, like, that much has changed since then. So, what is the action now against Israel to keep them accountable of what they're doing? There is none. So it just reminds me of talk. Gaza is in trouble. We feel for the people of Gaza. And so, in a lot of ways, Israel is winning because if you're going to talk without the action, then it's pointless to me.
Well, and essentially, it feels like Sam Husseini is saying that that's probably the point of what Israel's doing, is so that like international law is just not recognized, you know, because clearly, if they can get
But I
away
argue
with
it's
it,
not.
well, yeah, I mean that's what I would argue, is that it hasn't been.
It's,
I
it's not.
mean, classically, The Hague has been called just a way to prosecute African dictators we don't like, you know. So yeah, I found this today. So Sam Husseini again. Look who finally woke up, uniting for peace. This is Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur. Right, we've talked about her before, but she writes the tiny bodies of children in Gaza, hollowed out by induced starvation, are testimony of the worst humanity is capable of. It is time to impose an arms embargo and sanctions on Israel and urgently deploy a protection presence made of friendly soldiers, not from states who have supported the genocide. It is time for the UNGA to act under Uniting for Peace resolution. So, sounds like this is the new plan, at least with the ICJ. And it's pressure, at least with other UN member states, right? If they're getting any benefit from being a UN member state, if you enacted that resolution, they would be forced to at least do something to continue as a UN member state. Otherwise, like, they're out. So that would at least like rip the Band-Aid off, so to speak, you know? Like, if international law is going to be pushed back upon, you know, like, at least we'll know where we stand, you know? So, yeah, but that's it. That's all I got on that. Mr. Husseini, if you're watching, you're welcome to come on. I'm sure we missed a whole bunch. You're welcome to come explain things. And if you're in the chat, you're welcome to go ask Sam Husseini to come on to explain it to us. One of the two. But, you know, otherwise, talking about these things is almost certainly why we're demonetized on YouTube. So if you would like to support us financially, you can scan that QR code and go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork. You can leave us a couple of dollary dues. We appreciate it very much. But if you can't, times are tough, just like and subscribe, share this video, let people know about what's happening, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. What do you think this ICJ stuff will actually accomplish? Otherwise, thanks for watching.